Realtors, Byron King, your Chief Legal Officer at South Carolina Association of Realtors. It's the spring equinox. We're taping here. We've got a special guest star coming in. If you need to reach us, the legal hotline is 803-712-3478. Email is byron@screaltors.org. Austin Smallwood and Tara Pitts, the other lawyers here at South Carolina Association of Realtors, are in a hearing. So I got my props here. We'll talk about what these props represent, the forewarn app, the license plate, and the license law update at the General Assembly going on now. Our special guest, Nia Duggins, is Senior Policy Representative for Business Issues at the National Association of Realtors. And what they do is they look at the federal regulatory and legislative issues that impact realtors in their business operations. Nia is also the staff executive for the NAR committee, the NAR Business Issues Policy Committee. And if you want to volunteer for NAR committees, we'll let Nia talk about her committees. Maybe you'd be interested in volunteering when the volunteer opportunities come out. Kind of her background, her resume. She's worked as a lawyer at various nonprofits and law firms, the District of Columbia Superior Court, the United States Senate. She's a graduate of Bennett College and the Maryland School of Law. And we're taping in March because a big change happened on March 11th. Some new rules came about. Nia was with us at the beginning of the Biden administration and did a presentation on independent contractor issues for us at the beginning of the Biden administration in 2021. And now with this rule change coming out in March 11th of this year, as the Biden is gearing up for their campaign for re-election, it's a chance to relook at what happened in those years from 2021 to 2024 with independent contractors. So this is an independent contractor discussion. Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Hello to you all in South Carolina. It's a pleasure to join you all. And thank you, Byron, for the opportunity and to connect to discuss the DOL rule and just a lot of what is happening here in Washington.
Super. Yeah, and kind of my limited understanding of it, because you guys have done a great job. NAR's done a great job over the years protecting independent contractor status, which is vitally important to business operations for brokerages. And it seems like it's protected under the IRS rules, but kind of explain how the new rules maybe muddies the water between the IRS rule, the ABC test, the economic realities test. It seems to me we're protected under the IRS statute, but this new rule, the Fair Labor Standards Act, kind of muddies the water. Is that kind of how you would characterize what's going on with independent contractor status?
It muddies the water just a little bit, but not a lot. I will just clarify, definitely, as you noted, under the Internal Revenue Code, specifically Section 3508, real estate agents are classified as independent contractors and not as employees. However, that's for tax purposes. The Fair Labor Standards Act, more specifically, is a wage and hour law that focuses on wage protections. It sets the federal minimum wage. It also prohibits child labor law and really is a law designed to protect vulnerable workers. One of the challenges with issuance of the new rule and the final rule that the Labor Department has issued is that because there could be vulnerable workers in any industry, the Labor Department declined to give a specific carve out to any industry. So while under the Internal Revenue Code, real estate agents are classified as independent contractors, the Labor Department declined to provide that level of protection under the Fair Labor Standards Act. Because, again, there is this idea that vulnerable workers could be in any industry. And so they did not want to provide explicit carve-outs for any industry. But one of the things that the rule does is it does not automatically, trigger or make things challenging for the real estate sector per se. But there are certain factors that the rule adopts essentially under this economic realities test. And really it's a totality of the circumstances type of a rule. So it looks at a number of factors in assessing whether a worker should be classified as an employee or as an independent contractor under this labor law.
Super. And kind of my limited understanding for the news, our economy's changed. There's a lot of gig workers, I think, was one of the driving issues with this, right? With ride share, Uber kind of drivers, gig workers. Is that kind of what you were seeing when you were kind of working on this issue in Washington?
So, yes, I mean, our economy definitely, there has been a shift and evolution into gig work and just independent work in general. I think that is part of the discussion around this. But again, the crux of it and the heart of it is really geared toward those vulnerable workers who, again, for example, work in industries that may not be ones that we would think of, for example, like dishwashers or those who work in service-based industries that are not explicit, but surely gig work is a part of the changing economy. And we also know just in general the impact of the small business community and how important it is. So the Department of Labor in issuing this rule was really focused primarily on vulnerable workers, and that is what they stated based on our engagement with them. But they are aware of the importance of independent work and also just small businesses throughout our country and independent workers and the autonomy and freedom and flexibility that independent work allows, especially in the real estate industry. So we've articulated that to them a number of times, as 89% of NAR members are independent contractors.
Yeah, that's great information. So at South Carolina Association of Realtors, we provide kind of standard forms. We provide an independent contractor and broker agreement. So we recommend that brokerages always use the independent contractor and broker agreement. We provide one. Obviously, your lawyer can draft that up for you. And for the realtors, if you're interested, she did a video back in 2021 and talked about some of the ABC tests, the economic reality test. Just for the members, what's kind of a thumbnail, kind of a way your elevator speech when you're talking to realtors, how you explain these tests that can be used to determine if a real estate agent is an employee or an independent contractor?
A lot of the time, there are a lot of state laws as well as federal laws. Not every state has really spoken to this issue on how a worker should be classified. There are, as we're familiar with the ABC test, and there's also, a more common law test. And then there's this economic realities test, which looks at a number of different factors. Primarily, one of the major things that we think about when we assess whether a worker is an independent contractor or an employee is, of course, the nature and scope of work, and the degree of control, right, is really a huge factor. We know within the real estate sector that in order to practice real estate in many states at the state level, you have to be affiliated with a salesperson, rather has to be affiliated with one particular brokerage at a time. And so that is something that is important. But the guidance that the broker provides and just clarity around that. And then, of course, the independent contractor agreement is very crucial, right, in terms of the nature and scope of work and, how the independent contractor works. Typically, the independent contractor has the flexibility and autonomy to manage their business in the way that they see fit, including the, hours that they work, the days that they work, the manner in which they conduct their work. So those are really like the major distinctions, but the crux of what we look at for the most part when it comes to independent worker classification and how we look at rather worker classification matters focuses primarily on the nature and degree of control, and also the scope and nature of the work. Of course, various industries have different work arrangements, and so that goes into it as well. But a lot of how workers are classified is very fact dependent. So it looks a lot to the facts and circumstances regarding the parties involved. So in the context of real estate, brokers and agents, but it's important to understand the role of independent contractors within the industry.
Super, yeah, good points. And kind of real estate's a little bit different than a lot of these, gig workers, rideshare, food delivery, media, dishwashers, construction, because it's easy for like a rideshare. Hey, you go get your car, you get your insurance, you drive person from point A to point B. And like you point out, realtors, real estate industry is a little bit different because of license law, where you got a broker in charge that's kind of a supervisor and has some kind of minimal supervision duties. And like the key word you use, control, right? Control is kind of the critical parts of all these tests when they look at it. So that's kind of, in my opinion, that's kind of like some of the tension in the law is that the broker in charge has to exert some control, but not too much control. So we talked about the independent contractor agreement, getting that signed. And I read some of your information, watched your video from 2021, like not saying employee, referring to them as, hey, these are my associated licensees. These are not my employees. Don't tell them, hey, you don't have set office hours. But here's our broker policy manual. You know, we provide a broker policy manual under state law, under licensing law, and through our forms committee that they can tailor to the brokerage. That gives like, hey, here's how we're going to do buyer agency or non-agency under transaction brokerage. Here's how our compensation works. So kind of control is a little bit different from for our real estate, our members, right? That's kind of the way I look at it, that they can have control, but not too much control. Is that kind of how you explain it to brokers?
So basically, the control should be within the parameters of one, what is required by the Real Estate Commission, because they regulate, again, how real estate is practiced within a particular jurisdiction. So brokers as well as salespersons should always ensure that they are in compliance with state law and licensure requirements, right? When it comes to that. And then also state laws broadly. So one of the things that the Department of Labor has stated within the context of this rule is that, you know, they understand that there are state laws that are on the books and that in certain industries, those laws must be followed in a certain way. And so it is imperative that brokers and agents understand what those laws are and they follow those laws. One of the things, the supervision aspect of the broker in charge or the managing broker, a lot of that has to do with also consumer protection. And so while we do look at control, a lot of the supervision should be, again, within the parameters of the law. It should focus primarily on ensuring, you know, that the transaction is managed in the way that it is supposed to be. And that is really the focus of it, to ensure that the transaction takes place and that it takes place in the manner and way that it's supposed to.
Yeah, that's a great point. So, you know, our realtor members, they're under license laws. They got to protect the consumer, comply with kind of the standards to get the transaction done, protect the consumer in the real estate transaction, and even follow the NAR code of ethics too, to make sure that the client comes first. Those are great points. Some of the things I recall from reading in your last webinar is talking about independent contractors provide their own equipment, their own insurance, their own vehicle. They kind of set their own schedule. Any kind of other issues that can help reinforce independent contractor status versus employee, as far as like providing vehicles, insurance, cell phones, things like that? Anything else that you would recommend?
I think the main thing is ensuring that salespersons understand what it means to manage their business and for them to fully have ownership of that, including setting hours, again, providing their own resources for insurance, equipment, all of the things that they need in order to operate effectively. I think those are really like the major parts of this when it comes to assessing their independence, but the flexibility and autonomy are key. As you noted, Byron, like the providing some supervisory support and oversight is really what the broker does. And to the extent that the agent has additional questions about certain aspects of the transaction, they should be able to rely on that broker in charge. But definitely the onus is on the salesperson as well to understand fundamentally what it means to manage their business day to day and to operate as an independent contractor in this context.
Yeah, great information. And this March 11th date, what happened on March 11th that the realtors need to be aware of that you guys are working on? March 11th was the date when the rules changed. Is that a good way to say it?
So on January 10th, the final rule actually was issued regarding how workers are classified under the Fair Labor Standards Act. We were actually expecting the rule last fall and anticipated it during that time. We know that there had been a lot that the Labor Department had been working on, but the final rule came out January 10th of this year. It did go into effect on March 11th, as you noted, and is effective now. At NAR, we've been engaging with the Department of Labor. So we've met with them, many officials, specifically at the Wage and Hour Division, to discuss the rule. And we've specifically asked for industry-specific guidance that accounts for industry nuances and work relationships within the real estate context. One of the things, as I noted, that the Labor Department was focused on was vulnerable workers, but the rule does not take into account how real estate work arrangements are unique, right? And how in most instances, brokers can decide whether, again, an agent should be deemed an employee or independent contractor, but in more instances than not, many agents are independent contractors and they are not employees. But there are various models that are out there. However, we also understand that under some of the factors that they don't fit neatly within the real estate context. So, for example, one of the factors focuses on a presumption of independent contractor having non-exclusivity in terms of who they can contract with at any given time. And so in most instances, that does work, right? Like an independent contractor can enter into very non-exclusive different contracts in work arrangements. However, in real estate, as we noted, at the state level, in many states, a salesperson has to be affiliated with one brokerage at a time. So, and it's for primarily consumer protection and also to protect the transaction, right? And to ensure that we know who the broker in charge is at any given time. And so the rule does not account for that, right? It doesn't account for those state laws on how real estate should be practiced within a respective jurisdiction. So we've asked for industry-specific guidance for the real estate sector. We have also expressed concern with some of the factors that are outlined in the rule. And there are 6 factors with additional factors that could be considered specifically. But the factors that we primarily at NAR have concerns about are really focused on a few different areas. The nature and degree of control is one of the factors, the degree of permanence of the work relationship, and then also the extent to which work performed is an integral part of the employer's business. And so the Labor Department explains some of these, but it's still not as clear in terms of how it should be applied to different industries. And so that's what we're seeking additional guidance on. Also at NAR, we are and have been advocating in support of a bill in terms of legislation, which is HR 5419. And it is a bill that's focused on really a carve out under the Fair Labor Standards Act, specifically for real estate agents. So it's called the Direct Seller and Real Estate Agent Harmonization Act. And this bill is focused on providing real estate agents with a carve out under this particular labor law. And that carve out would be similar to the Internal Revenue Code carve out. It's not something that we expected the Labor Department to provide, but it is something that we have been advocating really in Congress as we seek a carve out on this particular issue.
Yeah, great information. Yeah, and kind of when I was reading the new rule, the part you emphasized kind of jumped out at me too, the kind of integral part of the business. Because like say I'm a general contractor, I build houses, I might have a plumbing independent contractor, an electrician, but an associated licensee, if somebody wanted to argue employee status, they might try to argue, hey, the broker and the associated licensee both do real estate and try to make that connection. So I think that was one of the issues that maybe was concerning. That's good to hear about the bill. What is this direct seller? I was kind of reading your information online about it. Who are the direct sellers? I saw y'all are working with the Direct Seller Association, but for the members, what are direct sellers?
So direct sellers are a lot of common individuals that you may be aware of that sell different products or services within a particular industry. We've seen them in the beauty industry, also in, financial services, various different financial services and service advisors work as direct sellers sometimes. We at NAR have been aligned with the direct sellers because the direct sellers also under the Internal Revenue Code Section 3508 enjoy protection as independent contractors as well. And so we are aligned in both working to protect the status of independent contractors and just broadly independent work, both for the real estate sector and then also for direct sellers, because we are aligned in that way.
Interesting. And then you mentioned a term kind of industry specific guidance. If you and your team got your best case scenario with Department of Labor, when you say industry specific guidance, is that some sort of letter or memo from Department of Labor? What does that look like, and what would it say in your kind of your best case scenarios that you guys are working towards?
So the goal really with the industry specific guidance is for one, the Labor Department to really understand the industries that they are seeking to regulate. So even though this is a broad rule that focuses on how workers should be classified in various industries, they should understand the impact that the rule could have on different industries. For example, real estate is regulated primarily at the state level. There's not a federal law that dictates how real estate should be practiced federally, right? Like that doesn't exist. And so because of that, we're asking that to the extent that there are states that have spoken to the issue of how workers should be classified within that respective jurisdiction, that the Labor Department would give deference to those state laws, right? And that they would also broadly understand what state laws are required for how an industry works and what the work relationships are. So they should understand the real estate commissions and what's required when it comes to various state laws as it relates to consumer protection, as it relates to marketing, as it relates to ensuring that the health and safety, right, in some of these work environments is in compliance both with state and federal law. But the industry guidance essentially would appreciate the various nuances of work relationships within the real estate context and what those look like. So, the guidance, we probably would expect some broad guidance, but we're asking really the Labor Department to understand the real estate industry a bit more. And also, we don't want this rule really to have a major preemptive effect. So again, where states have spoken to this issue, we want state law to lead. If again, the state law provides protection to workers within specific industries.
Yeah, it seems like common sense to me that industries are different, so there needs to be some allowance for that by the Department of Labor. That makes sense to me. Some of the other parts of the test you were talking about, like the permanence and nature of control, like you said, typically a real estate agent, a licensee, a salesperson, a broker associate, they're going to work for one broker in charge of time in South Carolina. One thing we hear on the hotline is when they separate, and I'm kind of going off topic a little bit from what you're talking about, Nia, but this is mainly for our listeners. What we recommend on the hotline, a lot of times an agent will separate from a brokerage for various reasons, better opportunities, they don't like where they're at, what have you. They might have what they consider their clients, the listings, the pendings, things like that. But in South Carolina, the way we're set up, the brokerage under the buyer agency agreements, the transaction brokerage, non-agency agreements, the listing agreements, the brokerage owns those assets, and that's kind of what the independent contractor says. But what we recommend, and no one when they call the hotline ever has it, is kind of a separation agreement. I refer to it almost like a prenuptial agreement that basically says, hey, here's what happens if you leave the brokerage. You can take the clients for free. You cannot take the clients for free. You can take them for a referral fee. You can take them for an upfront fee. They stay here. The commission splits will change. So this is kind of mainly on our level at the hotline. So I would just encourage agents, associated licensees, realtors, broker in charge, that you go ahead and get your lawyers to draft up or call the hotline and get your separation agreement in place now when everybody's, especially when you onboard somebody, everybody's happy. Because a lot of times when there's separation, there's emotions or anger or upset, and that can kind of poison the well for trying to negotiating monies or taking. And the clients, the consumers, they're used to working a lot of the large brokerages. They may have a personal relationship with the licensee. They may not even know the broker in charge, even though they're a legal relationship. So just like there's tension in the law about independent contractors, kind of tension with our consumers and their relationships, the brokerage. So we encourage brokerages and associated licensees, in addition to your independent contractor agreement, your compensation agreements, you get in writing up front what happens if you leave the brokerage, and we can help you on the legal hotline for that. So
I think that is a great point. I think it's important to be clear about the roles and responsibilities of all parties, and for that always to be in writing and it to be clear, in terms of what each party understands their role to be. I think that is a critical part and piece of this, and just a key mitigation strategy in terms of how do we protect the integrity of the industry, right? And I think that is just a key best practice. We at NAR also are working on really some FAQs that will be more specific, that we should be able to share very soon, related to the rule and just really best practices for how brokers and agents understand this rule and what they need to do going forward.
Super. Yeah, I watched, in addition to watching your webinar that you did with us back in 2021, I watched a recent one from your colleague, Matt Troiani, went into the law from NAR on independent contract. That was some good information. I was stunned how many issues you and your team handle on the regulatory side. Can you, for our viewers, can you kind of talk about the committees you oversee? I know you're a staff executive for the NAR Business Issues Policy Committee. Can you tell us what role that committee plays, please?
Yeah, so the Business Issues Policy Committee is one of NAR's public policy coordinating committees, and we have a number of public policy coordinating committees. We have the Commercial Policy Committee, we have Fair Housing, we have a number of Federal Taxation Committee, the Insurance Policy Committee. So we have a number of public policy committees, and exclusively we work on public policy matters here in Washington. Our staff, as you noted, the Business Issues Policy Committee, which focuses on specifically the operational side for realtors and realtors' business operations. So I work on worker classification issues, RESPA compliance, RESPA and broader compliance issues, trade matters that come up, anti-money laundering regulations that impact the real estate sector, and just broad broker education and awareness on different issues. So I work on, as you know, a number of different issues. We work a lot with federal agencies here in DC, and also with many members of Congress and their staff, as well as we take a deep dive on these issues and really look at how they impact the industry. And then everyone on the advocacy team, I would say right now, one of the major hot topics, of course, is affordability and housing supply issues, because there is a major constraint. And so those are ongoing issues that broadly we just work on across the association, because it's really a hot topic and a major concern, given the fact that in our country we've underbuilt housing, and so we don't have enough housing stock to accommodate the needs of everyone.
Yeah, it's definitely a problem here in South Carolina, something we're trying to address as well, housing supply and affordability. I was absolutely stunned when I looked at your webpage, all the things that your regulatory team does. For our members, I mean, they know the U.S. Congress and how RPAC and My Realtor Party deals with Congress, but for our viewers, kind of explain what you guys do on the regulatory side, because Congress, kind of sets my understanding, they kind of set big picture, but the bureaucracy, the administrators, they're really the ones that can really impact business. Kind of talk about the difference between Congress and the bureaucracy in DC and kind of what your team does.
It is big picture. I think it goes to looking at really just the various ways that our government operates, right? So we have Congress that passes a lot of the laws, which again, the legislative branch. Then we also have, the executive branch, which is the administration, but then also really almost like a subset of the administration are many of the federal agencies that oversee a lot of the implementation and development of a lot of laws. And also, given the Administrative Procedures Act and many other laws, the federal agencies have a lot of authority to develop rules and regulations that also impact our industry, right? So they're able to develop, such as the Department of Labor in issuing this rule. And so they will go through a regulatory process where there is pretty much like a lot of times a proposed rule that comes out. We will comment on the proposed rule and give feedback to the agency. The agency will then take that really under advisement and under consideration based on the comments. For example, the DOL rule, there were over 55,000 comments that were submitted, and anyone can submit a comment from, your average practitioner to someone, again, at the staff level to someone at an association. The comments are open and available for anyone to provide feedback. But the agencies will issue the notice of proposed rulemaking. And a proposed rule, they'll have an open comment period where they will take feedback from the public. And then they will take all of those comments into consideration, and then they will go back and assess and figure out where they need to make tweaks. And then we'll typically issue a final rule. And so once the final rule is issued, then there, again, are different impacts, and there is typically a time frame for when the final rule goes into effect. So initially, the final rule is issued. In this instance, with the final rule for DOL, it was issued in January. DOL gave essentially 60 days before the rule went into effect. And really, it gives everyone time to be put on notice, essentially, about the rule that is going into effect.
Very interesting. And then I'm interested in kind of your day-to-day, how your team operates when you're dealing with these executive branch or the federal agencies. Who are you meeting in person or Zooms, and are you talking to deputies? Are you talking to the directors from the agency, or a mix? Or kind of during your year, how does your team operate?
Yeah, so in our advocacy efforts, it's really a combination. We engage with members of Congress. We engage with their staff. We engage with federal agency staff officials. Some are policy advisors, some are deputy administrators, some are administrators within different agencies. But it just it's kind of a mix and a variety in terms of stakeholders that we talk to. And one of the other things that we do a lot is work in coalitions. So even in working on a lot of issues, we work in coalitions with other groups that are similarly aligned. For example, on the independent contractor rule, we are aligned with the direct sellers, but we also do a lot of work with a number of other groups that are in support of independent work and really champion independent work. So we write letters, we meet in person. Now that like COVID, we are in a post-COVID space. We are able to meet for the most part in person, but some meetings are hybrid, where it's a combination of Zoom and in person. But we strive for in-person meetings, but it's a combination of writing letters and engaging at different levels.
Interesting. And do you guys activate kind of grassroots realtors? Do you guys ever ask realtors to get in touch with officials or with members of Congress to help with some of these issues?
So absolutely. We definitely do. Typically, if we do a call for action, it will be around an issue that is imperative. I know a few months back, there was we were facing a government shutdown essentially. And of recent, unfortunately, we've been facing quite a few of those. But what happens when we do that, we really will activate members and encourage them to engage with their members of Congress to ensure that primarily that federal programs that are helpful to consumers and, just to the industry in general are not stopped. And so we do it a lot when it comes to the flood insurance program. And again, when we were facing the government shutdown, it would have meant really like delays and issues with FHA, USDA, and VA loans as well, right? And so we understand the impact of various shutdowns and just anything that we deem that deserves heightened attention and awareness and really needs almost like an all hands on deck approach, is when we will say and encourage members to engage with their members of Congress. But I think just generally having ongoing conversations about what's happening in your respective jurisdictions with your members of Congress and checking in, they want to hear from their constituents, and it's important to elevate the issues that one, you see in your businesses every day and that you work on, but then also broadly for them to understand the industry from your lens as practitioners. And so I think that is critical and key, just in relationship building.
Super. And then one thing we see on the state level, because we, Austin Smallwood interacts with the Real Estate Commission, Department of Natural Resources, Department of Health and Environmental Control, and it's not always adversarial. Sometimes it's friendly. They rely on us to provide. A lot of times, if they're trying to write a rule or influence Congress, they'll rely on our expertise in real estate. So it's a friendly relationship too. It's not always adversarial. Do you kind of see that in your practice with the agencies in DC?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The majority of the time, I mean, we understand that, there are different purposes and different reasons why different rules come out. But I think our goal is making sure that we provide the education, the support, and that we are an ally and a partner with, our government, and making sure that they understand the industry and how to understand all of the stakeholders within the industry. But at the end of the day, our goal is to advance home ownership, and also to make sure that we advance what it means to have a property interest and property rights. And so I think that is really our goal. But yes, we have great collegial relationships with a lot of the various stakeholders that we engage with here in Washington, and that's the goal across really the industry, is to make sure that we are an ally and a partner, and that again, that we are ready and available to have the conversations about the different issues that come up and how they impact the real estate industry. Also, our research. I mean, a lot of the time, many government agencies will reference our research, and will look to NAR as a leader and industry. Major industry stakeholder when it comes to home ownership and just understanding what's happening throughout the industry, both on the residential and the commercial side.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, realtors change people's lives. It's one of the reasons I work here, probably one of the reasons you're with the National Association. You're accomplishing something, building generational wealth, helping people to improve their lives, giving people a home, giving a business to operate. I know you mentioned it, but for our viewers, I was absolutely stunned when I looked at your webpage about all the things that your side of the association handles in DC. You mentioned business, there's immigration reform, money laundering, RESPA, some of these you mentioned, RESPA, the TILA, Small Business Administration, visas for investors, seasonal workers, worker classifications, independent contractor versus employee that we're talking about today. You mentioned commercial, that it touches energy efficient buildings, ADA, banks and thrifts, commercial lending, crowdfunding, drones, lease accounting, even cannabis in some states where it's been legalized, conventional residential lending. You talked about the community reinvestment, credit policy and scoring, financial regulatory informed GSEs, mortgage loan limits, the PACE, energy qualified mortgages, short sales, student loan debt. And it goes on. You guys touched on the environment, the Clean Water Act, climate change, eminent domain, Endangered Species Act, lead paint, private property rights, wildfires, and then fair housing. You mentioned that, disparate impact, gender identity, sexual orientation, housing vouchers, formerly known as kind of Section 8s. And in April, Tiara Pitts, our Fair Housing Director, is going to be doing a series of videos. So stay tuned. April's Fair Housing Month next month, which will be happening soon. You talked about federal tax. You guys talked about capital gains, carried interest, depreciation, tax reform, foreign investors, foreign buyers of land, farms and near military bases, internet taxes, mortgage debt relief, opportunity zones. Our Senator Tim Scott was really important with that. Protecting the 1031. One of the best things NER helps protect the 1031 exchange on the commercial side, business deductions, going on. Valuation issues, housing issues like counseling incentives, FHA, mortgage insurance, multifamily insurance, rural housing, Veterans Administration insurance, health insurance, NFIP flood insurance, natural disaster policies, pandemic insurance, private flood insurance, terrorism insurance, and then kind of wrapping it up, technology with broadband, trying to get into these rural areas and improve the economy, copyrights, trademarks, data security, privacy. Last month we had your colleague Nia Duggins, a lawyer with NAR, talk about data privacy and security. Check that podcast out. E-signatures, net neutrality. You guys do a lot. Who are some other members of your team that you work with at NAR that you want to give some shout outs to?
Brian Green is our VP of Policy Advocacy. And then Joe Harris is also the VP of Government Advocacy. Evan Lydiard handles a lot of our federal taxation matters. Austin Perez handles association health plans and all things insurance, essentially. Chris Christensen is our new Director of Technology, Federal Technology Policy. Alexia Smokler and Colette Massengale and Brennan work on all fair housing matters. Aaron Stackley works on our commercial policy matters. Drew Myers works on our state and local issues. While we don't weigh in on state and local policy matters, but we do provide support and want to know what is happening a lot of the time at the state and local level to ensure that we are keeping a good monitor on things at the state and local level and really just have an awareness and understanding of what's happening in many states and jurisdictions as it relates to the industry. So Ken Fears and Matt Emery work on conventional financing matters. Jeremy Green works on a lot of our VA and USDA and FHA matters. So we have a robust team here in DC, and that's just part of the policy advocacy team. We work primarily as like the subject matter experts and engage with, like I said, various stakeholders on these issues. But we have a robust team here in DC, and we all play a critical role in working on the issues.
Yeah, that's great. And then for the viewers, all those names she mentioned, there's a lot of friends, that are familiar names: Brian Green, Joe Harris. They're great friends of South Carolina Association of Realtors, and so they support us too all the time. Austin Smallwood was on the tax committee. I think Evan, you mentioned him. I think he might have been the staffer for that. Austin's been involved with a lot of issues for us, especially in the last few years. Producer Mike wanted me to mention, you mentioned Alexia Smokler. She's done some videos for us, and in April when our Fair Housing comes out, she's going to be one of our guest presenters for that. So stay tuned in April for Tiara Pitts, and the SCR will be producing a lot of Fair Housing Month information, and NER's Alexia Smokler will be on there. But all those names: Drew Myers, Ken, Jeremy, Aaron. Hope I didn't leave anybody out. I didn't know Chris Christensen, but you mentioned he might be maybe new.
Yes, Chris actually joined us last fall and works on our federal technology policy. So he's helping to lead a lot of our work around AI and just broader technology in the property technology space. And he engages a lot with the various REACH companies and technology companies that NAR is engaging with. So he works on a lot of that. And Shannon McGann, who is our Chief Advocacy Officer here in DC. So she provides oversight and really oversees the entire and leads the entire advocacy team.
That's a good point. Like I always think of you guys separate, like regulatory and kind of, down up at the hill, but really you guys kind of work together on a lot of these issues. So that's a good point.
Yes.
Good thing for our members to be reminded of. Super. And then for our viewers, if any of them want to join, want to volunteer in the future for your NAR business issues policy committees, what are some things that you guys work on? If any viewers are interested, they could volunteer for that committee.
Yes, yes. So there is an entire process for how you can apply to be a part of one of the NAR committees. And I believe that the committee, like that application and selection process, the application process, I believe, is currently open. But our committee focuses on a lot of the issues we discussed today. Worker classification is definitely a top one. Anti-money laundering regulations is really another one that we are really focused on primarily right now, because there is implementation of the Corporate Transparency Act and also the beneficial ownership rule, which is taking place. Also, the Department of Treasury, one of the federal agencies, also recently issued a proposed rule around reporting for non-finance real estate transactions and what that should look like. The goal is really to stop the illicit financial activities involving real estate and to stop illicit financial crimes. And so we've heard both from law enforcement on the FBI side and also from Treasury that this is a prevalent issue. So that is another major issue that we're working on. As I noted, consumer protection, vacant land scams is something else that is coming up. Wire fraud and business email compromise is something that the committee also works on. And we're also working with other partners to create educational materials around prevention of elder fraud and abuse within the real estate context, specifically for older adults and elders, essentially. So we're working on a number of different issues, but this is some of the things that this particular committee, the Business Issues Policy Committee, works on.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, I remember reading some articles about FBI and Treasury alerts, because I guess the money laundering, so you've got dirty money, from illegal drugs or some other sort of criminal activity. I guess they can try to wash that money through a real estate transaction, maybe flip a mansion or something down in South Florida. Is that kind of what you guys are, when you say money laundering, is that what you're talking about?
Yes. So it's essentially money that is taking, like illicit money, essentially, that is from, or is illicit gains from, whether it be, sometimes it is from human trafficking, it could be from drug sales, it could be from a lot of different things, but essentially the money is then, like you said, it enters into some way within the financial sector, and specifically can be used and has been used for like various purchases of real estate, right? And so there are concerns around that, and even how the formation of anonymous shell companies are created and used for nefarious purposes. And so how do we work collaboratively with our partners at the federal level to really combat this issue? So yes.
Very, very interesting. And then you touch on some things we've seen in South Carolina, the vacant land sale scam. So we've got up here one of my props, because Austin and Tier on here, I put some props up that are forewarned. So if you have, realtors, South Carolina Association realtor members can, take their smartphone, download the forewarn app. It's kind of an instant background check app. It's safety. So say you're going to go do a showing at night alone, and you put the phone number or the name in there, and it pulls up a criminal record for assault and battery. Maybe you don't go to that showing. But it also helps with vacant land sale scams, because the seller impersonation vacant land sale scams, they impersonate the true owner of vacant land, usually expensive land on our coast like Myrtle Beach, Charleston Islands, or Hilton Heads, where we see a lot of it is even spreading inland. Well, they'll impersonate the seller with fake IDs, only contact electronically. So this forewarn app can help you get in touch with the true seller of the land. You can check with neighbors and the HOA to try to get, other emails or phone numbers, because you don't want to rely, when you get that email, hey, I'm overseas, I need to sell some land in Hilton Head, I need to do it fast, I don't even want it in the MLS, I don't even want any signage, I want to do it below market, I want a cash offer, and then just use my notary and somewhere else that I provide. Here's my phone number, my email, and then it closes and the money gets wired to the crooks. But what you can head that off if you can find out another phone number, an email address, or even the tax record address of the true owner. Get in touch with the true owner and they go, oh, that's not me, you're dealing with a crook. So 401 can help with that as well. One thing we've heard, the crooks are adapting, right? So we used to say, U.S. or FedEx, overnight a letter to the true owner using the tax bill address. These crooks are getting smart enough, they'll call the county tax assessor and make a change of address. Like, oh, I moved, I send my tax bill to this address. So even that defense, is the crooks, they're adapting like everything else. They adapt to try to get around defenses. So that's very interesting. Wire fraud, I remember like at a risk management meeting at NAR meetings, there's some good news. There's some FBI agents saying they were able to recover some of the money easier now. The banks, they were able to claw back the money, where in the past, sometimes that money was just gone. So that's things that are happening in South Carolina. So that committee sounds very interesting for any realtors that want to sign up. Contact us. We can send you the links and get you on the committee. And how do y'all meet? Do y'all meet at the mid-year and then the annual meeting? Do you do Zoom meetings in between? What's kind of the workload for a realtor that was on your committee?
So it just depends on every committee within like the public policy coordinating committees is going to be a little bit different. For the Business Issues Policy Committee, we actually meet monthly. We meet the fourth Wednesday of every month, either via Zoom, and then in May and in November, we meet in person. So in May, we will be having a meeting in DC. And then in November of this year, our meeting will be in person in Boston. But we meet every month. Typically, we have a speaker, and then we also just go over I want to hear a lot of what's happening in various markets throughout the country of all the members. And then generally, we also will have a speaker who will provide a presentation monthly on one of the different topics within the jurisdiction of the committee. So we'll talk about a lot of the issues that are coming up, how they're coming up, and just best practices and, what we can do more in Washington, and just, a lot of feedback from members of the committee, but we meet monthly. Mm-hmm.
That's an interesting committee. I might even sign up for that. And y'all use the hub a lot, I guess. There's a lot of reading for the committee members, prepping for different things, right?
Yes. So most of the information that I share regarding the regulations and different things that are coming up, even that, but also Washington reports, which if you go to NAR's website, there is a link that will allow you to see the Washington reports and also the full advocacy agenda and a lot of our work here in DC. But the Washington report is almost updated for the most part in real time when we meet with different federal agencies, whether we are engaging with various officials on different topics and what we're working on. So that information is definitely available at nar.realtor, and there is a whole link with information about federal advocacy. And there's also a federal advocacy A to Z document, which goes over all of the issues that you mentioned, Byron, that we work on at almost every touch point that impact the industry. It's a full listing of all of those issues listed on the NAR website as well.
Yeah, that was impressive. Thanks for your time today. Any kind of remarks you want to make in closing? After that, if you'll stay tuned, I go through what I call my commercials. I go through the Realtors top 10 hotlines and things like that. But in closing, anything you want to say to the listeners?
Just thank you for the opportunity. I'm available. I'm a resource. If you have questions, feel free to reach out. I'll make sure that my information is available to you. But happy to be here to discuss a lot of the issues that we're working on here in DC, specifically the worker classification matter and this new rule. And so if you have additional questions, feel free to reach out. Also, stay tuned to nar.realtor for additional resources and just best practices on how you can really stay in compliance and also mitigate liability as it relates to the rule.
Fantastic. Thanks again for your time. And it sounds like the realtors that are going up to the District of Columbia for the mid-year, the legislative meetings in May, there might be some issues from your group that'll be maybe even when they go to the Hill, they'll be talking about. So it's very interesting.
Yes, yes, definitely. Like I said, HR 5419 will be one of the major advocacy points that we will be focused on, which is, again, the Direct Seller and Real Estate Agent Harmonization Act. So we will be, advocating in support of that, but working on, just protecting the ability of real estate agents to be classified as independent contractors will be one of the talking points and one of the major areas of focus for the legislative meetings in May.
Super. Thanks again.
Thank you.
For the viewers, we got the license law bill, Lindsey Jackson, Austin Smallwood, the lobbying team at the State House. They're working on the license law update, so that'll be coming out soon. License plates, you can buy these for your vehicles at DMV. It supports our Habitat for Humanity grants. We talked about the Forewarn app, download that. And then we always talk about the top 10 hotlines. Our top 10 hotlines are as follows. Number 1, state law questions. Number 2, standard forms questions. 3 is kind of a catch-all other, and we'll talk about some of those at the end. 4 is license law questions. 5 is advertising questions. 6 are NAR Code of Ethics issues. 7 is disclosure issues. 8 is compensation issues. 9, agency issues. Number 10, due diligence issues. So independent contractors not in the top 10, so that was good, but this is good information. Kind of our catch-all for others, earnest money, ethics complaints, broker office management. So I guess that is independent contractor agreements, compensation agreements, separation agreements. So I spoke too soon there. Property management, arbitration, mediation, appraisal issues, fair housing. Mike wanted me to remind all the viewers, stay tuned for April. Mike and Tara are working with some speakers, Alexia and others, for some great videos for Fair Housing Month, so stay tuned for those. We've got last year's videos and the year before that are at our YouTube channel. Multiple listing service issues with the class action lawsuits and the settlement news from recently. Those are front and center. Stay tuned for information from us, webinars, presentations, and email information's been going out. Nick Kromitis has done some of his recent his updates on those issues. Federal law issues, again, multiple offers. So that concludes our updates on our top 10. Talked about get your Forewarn safety and scam app downloaded. Nia was talking about the vacant land sale scams. Reminder, crooks are changing the tax bill address, so be aware of that as well. Get your license plate at DMV. April Fair Housing, we talked about. Tara Pitts, Mike Chris, Sharon Stone are working hard on that with some great presenters and for some great videos. We talked about the license law bill, Lindsey Jackson, Austin Smallwood, and the lobbying team. April's Fair Housing Month. This is the end of March, so by the time you see this video, it'll be right on top of us. Good time to remind you about fair housing. And our training on fair housing will be implemented coming up, going forward after this year. Stay tuned for class action lawsuit information. NAR is doing a good job of keeping us in the loop on the settlement negotiations. Keep it safe, legal, and profitable. Thanks for joining us, Nia. We'll see you guys later.
Thank you. Take care.